Hey, how y'all doing today? This is Keith Pompey from the Philadelphia Inquirer. And today, you guys are in for a little treat. Me, Sam Carchidi, Scott Lauber, and Les Bowen, we came up with our top 16 players on our beats. Of course, I cover the Sixers, Sam covers the Flyers, Scott covers the Phillies, and Les the Eagles. So we just came up with our top 16 players so we can have a pool. It's going to be kind of like an NCAA tournament pool. So look, check us out. You may agree, you may disagree, but you'll be amazed and you'll be surprised on who we think is going to be number one.
So I went from listing them from 1 to 16 in terms of like one being the guy I determined to be the greatest to down to 16. So then when we were asked, who would come out of your bracket as your final four, I actually matched them up in what the games would be, the 1-16, the 8-9. And now I wish when I had ordered them in such a way that maybe some of the matchups would be, like, wouldn't you love to see, like, if the 8-9 game, for instance, was Jimmy Rollins against Larry Bowa, and fans essentially had to pick who the greatest shortstop was in Phillies history, it ends up not being like, the matchups don't line up to be what the greatest games you'd like to see, or the greatest matchups you'd like to see. So in hindsight, I wish I had thought of it more in those terms than just in terms of like 1 through 16. Like, what matchups would I like to see people vote on?
Well, it's funny you say that, Scott, because I didn't even consider that. I'm just looking at my list now. And of course, if you go 1 plays 4, 2 plays 3, like that, the 1-4 matchup is Bobby Clark against Eric Lindros. How apropos is that? Because as you know, they butted heads, and
that's if they make it through the early rounds as their season goes, right?
If they get there, right, that would be a very sweet matchup.
Well, my 8-9 would be Randall Cunningham versus Ron Jaworski, which I think is a very
I like that.
They were right there together. One succeeded the other.
My 1-4 matchup would be Wilt Chamberlain against Charles Barkley. I like Chuck, but I think the height advantage would kill him. On that one. The one thing is, though, my 1-2 matchup, assuming both of them make it, I really I am intrigued with the Wilt Chamberlain, Dr. J. And here's my reasoning. Wilt Chamberlain is the greatest Sixer of all time, in my opinion. He's arguably the greatest player, but he's only been here for three plus years as a Sixer. Like, I know he was a Warrior. And Dr. J, he was Mr. Philadelphia or Mr. 76er. When I look at Magic Johnson, I look at Larry Bird, I look at Dr. J passing the torch to them and somewhat passing the torch to, Michael Jordan. So as great as Wilt was, and it was hard for me to make him number one just because it was only 3 years. But when you look at his stats, you have to. Dr. J is the guy. I mean, whenever I see Doc, there was only one time when I interviewed someone and I was like, wow, I'm interviewing this guy. And it was Dr. J, because as a kid, I was just always like, wow, that's Doc. So that's the only time it's happened. But I would like to see those two, go head to head in their prime.
But Doc really stylistically changed the NBA. I don't know that Wilt did that. I mean, he dominated the NBA the way no athlete has ever dominated any league since then for his era. But Dr. J's style of play, kind of led to Jordan and those guys, Magic. I don't know if that era would have been what it was without Dr. J sort of setting the template.
Just to get back to Wilt, though, he just dominated games defensively, offensively. And I remember he got a lot of criticism because he was taking so many shots. He was averaging like 45, 50 points a game. And he got a lot of criticism because he wasn't sharing the ball. So the next year, he just changed his style completely, and he led the league in assists. I mean, this is a guy that could do anything on the court. As I said before, I just think Wilt is number one on this entire 64-team field, but I don't think he's going to win it just because of our younger readers. But, Wilt as you said, Keith, I agree with you. You could argue that he's the best player in NBA history, but there are a lot of people that would say Jordan, or there's several other candidates, but Wilt, for his time, for what he did, for his athleticism, I think he stands by himself.
On my side, as I look at it now, like I said, I've broken them down now into what the tournament style matchups would be. Again, just as the seedings went, and I ranked them by not by who I thought would be the best matchups. Schmidt's gonna, Mike Schmidt should emerge from my group. He happens to be, his half of my bracket happens to be a lot of players who played before a lot of our readers were able to watch, like Jim Bunning and Dick Allen are two of the more contemporary guys on his side of the ballot, and the other side is stacked with recent guys. Rollins, Howard, Utley, Halliday, they can't all come out of that half of it. So I think that the Steve Carlton half of the bracket, the number 2 seed, he's going to have a tougher time getting through, just because I think, as we've been saying, there's going to be a recency bias here. People are going to vote for people that they saw more recently. I've got Rollins and Howard in a first round matchup, and I'm curious to see how that goes. Robin Roberts against Roy Halladay is a 3 versus a 14 first round game, and I have a feeling Halladay might upset him, if you want to call that an upset, and move forward. So it's that cluster of recent guys, and I think that I'd be curious to see which one gets the furthest in our reader voting.
Yeah, from my side, I think the one thing with the Flyers, I've been saying, I think the younger guys are going to dominate this voting, but the Flyers don't really have many younger guys, so I think it's going to come out chalk. I think Clark and Perrant, who are ranked 1, 2 respectively, are going to come out. But there's some coming out as the finalists from the Flyers, but there's some interesting matchups. One of the ones I think is most interesting is the number 5, Mark Howe, and a number 12, Claude Giroux. Howe, of course, is a Hall of Famer. Claude Giroux is probably a borderline Hall of Famer right now, and certainly with a few more highly productive years, could be a Hall of Famer in his own right. So that to me is the best matchup. An interesting matchup, too, is number 2, Bernie Perrant, against number 15, Ron Hextall, just because they're goalies, and Bernie should win that easily, but you never know. So, but I think from the Flyers, it'll be chalk. And to go ahead a little bit, my final 4 predictions for all 4 groups would be Bobby Clark, Wilt Chamberlain, Mike Schmidt. I'm going with 3 number 1 seeds, and then Dawkins, a 4 seed, going to the final, and I have Dawkins winning the whole thing.
Yeah, I would say exactly the same thing. I mean, if we're predicting what the fans are going to do, that's probably what's going to happen. I cannot pick Doc as the greatest Eagle. I would say it's Reggie White. But I think you're probably right about what the fans are going to think. And I certainly agree with your other 3. I don't think anybody can dispute your other 3, really, not in terms of popularity, but in terms of what they did for the franchises. I think that's really solid.
So who wins it all? So if we've got a final 4 of, and I guess we're not sure, we're not sure where the quadrants are, like where the brackets are. But if we have a final 4 of Schmidt, Bobby Clark, Wilt, and Doc, maybe we say, like, what would the matchups you'd like to see in the semifinals be, and then who emerges?
Yeah, I think any of the matchups would be great. I mean, Dawkins Clark, Dawkins Schmidt, Dawkins Wilt. I mean, how can you argue against any of them? But maybe well, you can. I was going to say maybe match up players from their era. Clark and Wilt, they may have overlapped a little bit. Schmidt and Clark would have been the same year, so I guess that would be a pretty good matchup to see Mike Schmidt, Bobby Clark.
2 guys on the Mount Rushmore, probably, if we were doing that.
Yeah. I don't know who would win that. That would be a great one. And then you would have Dawkins and Wilt. And, I just think because our readers are more familiar with Dawkins, they would probably go with Dawkins. But again, I would obviously go with Wilt. But it's going to be fascinating, and there's no right or wrong answers. I mean, the whole idea is to have fun with this, and yeah, they would be great semifinals.
Yeah, I think Wilt is the greatest Philadelphia athlete of all time, but I'll be flabbergasted if he wins this vote with younger people. I have a feeling it's probably going to be Doc. I think Wilt or Schmidt are probably the two greatest figures in the histories of those sports here in Philadelphia.
Yeah, I agree with you, Les. I think it would be Schmidt and Wilt, and I think Wilt would win. That's my opinion. But unfortunately, a lot of people, like you guys are saying, who are going to be online voting are going to be way younger than us. And they look at Doc as like, they just look at him as the man. And he was the man. Yeah. I mean, he is a Hall of Famer. But, they don't really look at the history. I mean, if you're older than, let's just say LeBron James, they're like, hey, I mean, because they think LeBron is old. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's who they're going to go with. And I mean, when you think of it, like as I was compiling this list and I was looking at your guys' list, you forget about all the greats and all the Hall of Famers, so to speak, who came from the Philadelphia or from these four franchises. Mm-hmm. And that's the one thing that really stands out. But I do think that B-Dog, just because of who he is, not just a player, but his personality, that people are going to pick him. And, who knows, not to say that he's not deserving to get there, but is based on a popularity contest, he's going to get it.
Yeah, my point about Doc was, and I don't want anybody to misinterpret this, I think Doc embodies the spirit of Philadelphia to a lot of people, and that's very significant. But in terms of what he did on the field, the greatest figure in Eagles history, no, not. He was not,
Keith, let me throw something at you. Do you think Joel Embiid, I know you have him ranked 8th, do you think he has any chance because, young readers are going to be voting in this? Do you think he has any chance of going to the top? And unfortunately, from my perspective, you have him at 9 and Hal Greer 8, and which means they'll meet in the first round. And Hal Greer was my guy growing up. Yeah. I loved Hal Greer. I mean, underrated player. I mean, he's a Hall of Famer, but people think of Wilt. It was Wilt's team, but Hal Greer was something special. But do you think Embiid has a chance to sneak up and maybe steal the Sixers' top player?
I think he has a chance to sneak up. I don't think that he has a chance of actually getting there. I mean, you may have a lot of people voting for him, but I can't see it. I mean, because, when you look at the list and just like, okay, so I have Wilt number 1, right? Arguably the greatest player to ever play the game, a Hall of Famer. Dr. J number 2, Hall of Famer. Allen Iverson, Hall of Famer. Charles Barkley, a Hall of Famer. Moses, Billy C. All these guys are in the Hall of Fame. And the one thing that Joel, you can say, if Joel stays injury free and a lot of things go right, he'll be right up there, on that Mount Rushmore. But, right now, I mean, I know there's a young crowd, but we're talking about all these guys who are some of the all-time greats, not just in the Sixers history, but in the NBA history. Right now, as good as Joel Embiid is, he has yet to be a first-team All-NBA player. He has yet to finish a season. So all these guys were, in their prime, not only the best in their position, but they were among the best 5 players in the NBA and in their prime. So that's why I believe Joel, he'll move up for popularity, but I can't see him right now be on the Mount Rushmore of the 76ers.
All right. Well, we're about ready to wrap this up, I guess.
Yeah, I think so. So, I mean, it was fun for us, right, to put together these lists of 16, and hopefully it'll be fun for readers to vote on it, to kind of imagine, these sort of matchups. I think it's going to be kind of fascinating to see who emerges from. We all might be wrong. I mean, maybe they're all recent guys who emerge. Maybe it's Jimmy Rollins against Brian Dawkins in the final. Who knows?
Yeah, I just want to say, obviously, we're doing this at a very trying time. It's kind of one of the reasons why we're doing it. because sports is in a situation, our world is in a situation that we haven't experienced in our lifetimes. And I hope this helps people sort of cope with having to be inside and having uncertain futures. And I hope everyone out there is all right, and that that this all gets normalized fairly quickly.
Well said.
That's to all of you.
I think we all second that last great point. Well, and before we go, why don't we just real quick say who we think will win and who we think should win. And I would say I think Wilt should win, but I think Dawkins will win. So I'll go to Scott now.
Yeah, look, I think the winner should be from the Wilt, Schmidt, Clark grouping. But I'm skeptical. I also think it's going to be somebody more recent. As I said, I think it could be Doc. I think it could be J-Roll. I think it could be even an Allen Iverson kind of guy could speak up and win just because they're fresher in everyone's mind.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. I was going to say AI has, I think people really feel like him, like they feel about Dawkins. AI was not the greatest Sixer ever in terms of what he did on the court, but I think so many fans identified with him and his spirit that he's going to be a very, very potent vote getter in this. I'm with the Wilt crowd. I'm old enough to have seen Wilt play when I was a kid anyway. And my thing with all this stuff, with Hall of Fames and everything, is you look at how people did in their era against the competition they had, because every decade or so, the athleticism and the size and everything gets way better. And obviously the people playing now are really the best athletes, of all time. But you look at how people did against the people that they were competing against, and nobody ever will dominate any team sport the way Wilt Chamberlain did. And so I have to go with him, but I doubt very seriously the fans will.
Yeah, I'm in agreement. I think Wilt should win. He is my pick. But, just to keep it short and closing, I think B-Dawk will win. I mean, because I think that as much as AI is, people love him, they adore him, Wilt is just Wilt. And I think that there's going to be some people who are going to come to their senses. And I love AI, but when you think of what Wilt did, they're going to say, hey, he has to get it. But B-Dawk, recently was in the Hall of Fame. He's Mr. Eagle. I do think that, Reggie White is the greatest Eagle. But yeah, Reggie White left and went to the Green Bay Packers. You know what I mean? And right. I think that because of that, and I know B-Dawk was traded and he came back here and was retired and stuff like that. But B-Dawk is the guy. And I think from a popularity contest, he's going to win.
All right. We'll wrap it up.
Yes.
Thanks for watching, everybody. And
thank you. Be well.
Thanks, guys.
And subscribe if you can.
Yes.